Welcome to Anabaptist 101. We're going to jump right on in and look at a brief history of the tradition. The Anabaptist tradition of Christianity traces its roots back to the 16th century in Zurich, Switzerland. In 1525, at a council meeting, the tradition of Anabaptism began to form as individuals wanted to return to the faith found in Scripture. A Protestant tradition, why was there so much controversy? Well, it was deemed too radical by many Calvinists and Catholics alike, as they did not want to recognize a new covenant formed with the death of Christ. Furthermore, the tradition promoted adult baptism within the rivers of Zurich. From this, they were given the name meaning rebaptizers. The rebaptizers were expelled from the city. However, small sects still existed and began to spread amongst the lower classes through evangelism. Ultimately, the full Anabaptist movement began with three groups as the faith spread across Western Europe. The first group formed was in Switzerland and was known as the Swiss Brethren. It is important to note that in 1697, the Amish tradition branched off from the Brethren group due to the disagreement on excommunicated members. Then, as the Anabaptist tradition spread further, another group developed, which is known today as the Mennonites. Lastly, the third group formed in Germany, and they are known as the Hutterian Brethren. Persecution united the Anabaptist community, as it was common across Europe for the practitioners of the Anabaptist movement to face such. For example, in 1566, there were over 3,000 deaths of Anabaptists in the Netherlands alone. The persecution was the worst in the cities of Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. In London, England, in 1575, 2 Anabaptists were burned alive. With cities' persecutions so extreme, practitioners were pushed into the rural areas. If the Anabaptists were facing such extreme persecution in Europe, why didn't they migrate to North America where religious freedom was tolerated? Well, in the 18th century, many in fact did flee to North America. The Mennonites, Amish, and Hutterian all fled to the United States. The first permanent Anabaptist congregation in the United States was near Philadelphia in 1683 in the area of Germantown. As time has progressed, like many traditions, the Mennonites have continued to face internal schisms throughout the Western world. It is important to note that not all Anabaptists are without a television or phone, but they do believe in simple living. They continue to branch off to some capacity as beliefs continue to diversify, but the core beliefs of Anabaptism remain the same to this day. Now we are going to talk about the leaders. Although there is no official starter of the tradition, many men influenced the Anabaptist movement. The most influential leaders in the Anabaptist movement were Conrad Grebel, Felix Manz, George Blaurock, Menno Simons, and Jacob Hutter. Conrad Grebel first started to rebaptize in the year 1525. He was a firm believer that infant baptism was wrong, so he actually rebaptized people as adults. He died of the plague. Felix Manz was also very influential. In 1525, he split from the mainline Protestants over the subject of infant baptism. However, the city council also sided with mainline Protestantism on this subject, and they demanded that Manz and his friends recant and baptize their infants. Manz refused and started to rebaptize adults. The council very quickly outlawed this practice and made it punishable by drowning. Manz continued to rebaptize adults, and he was drowned himself on January 5th, 1527. George Blaurock was originally a Roman Catholic priest who switched to Anabaptism. In his search for biblical truth, he found Conrad Grebel and Felix Manz. In 1525, they all rebaptized one another and started preaching to others. Blaurock was eventually arrested, beaten, and banished from Switzerland. He went to Tyrol in Austria and continued his ministry there. He baptized many people and founded many churches, but he ended up being burned at the stake on September 6, 1529.
Menno Simmons was a very important Anabaptist leader in the 16th century. He became a Catholic priest at the age of 24, but eventually turned from the teachings of the Catholic Church. His preaching turned to the side of Anabaptist. He was very influential in his writing and leadership. His legacy is still alive today as his followers took on his name to call themselves the Mennonites. He died in the year 1559. Jacob Hutter is less well known, but he was very influential in his time. He and his followers stressed the sharing of community goods that is seen in the New Testament church. They were also extreme pacifists and were very against violence. Hutter wasn't a theologian and didn't make any breakthroughs in the Anabaptist beliefs, but he was a great preacher and leader. Also heavily persecuted for what he believed, Hutter was tortured and burned at the stake in 1536. He had many followers who also continued his legacy by naming themselves after him. These are the Hutterians. These are the beliefs that are unique to the Anabaptist. We're also going to explore the strengths and weaknesses of this belief. Anabaptists have three main beliefs. Number one is community. Anabaptists will say that community is at the center of their beliefs. For instance, rather than having their Sunday morning service in a church like a lot of other congregations in America, they have their service in a member of the community's home. They also say forgiveness is essential to community because it brings people back together. The second thing Anabaptists believe in is nonviolence. Anabaptists are a bunch of very peaceful people. They believe that there is always a peaceful answer to any given problem. If they have something to protest, they do it in a nonviolent manner. They like to respond with love through faith. That being said, they sometimes break the law because they feel like it disagrees with what Jesus teaches. For example, many Anabaptists will refuse to be in the military because it breaks the 10th commandment, you shall not murder. Goshen College, a Mennonite school, has stopped singing the national anthem at all sporting events because they claim it promotes violence with its warlike themes. Finally, the third thing Anabaptists believe in can be found in baptism. There are some denominations that believe in infant baptism only. This is not the case for Anabaptists, because they believe that you should be old enough to know what you're doing and what it means when you get baptized. They will typically wait until they are in their mid-teens before they will get baptized. They believe that the act of baptism should be a public declaration of their faith, and that cannot be the case in infant baptism. The biggest strength of the Anabaptist faith is their belief that violence is not the answer. If there is a peaceful way to get something done, they find it, even if it inconveniences them. The biggest weakness of their faith is that they don't believe in the use of technology. They have kind of refused to progress with the rest of the world. In a sense, they have shut themselves off from the rest of the world. Many churches today have worked with the media to send out messages of faith and love of God, but that is not something Anabaptists can do with their lack of technology. But they are content living their simplistic lifestyle. So thank you for joining us today in Anabaptist 101.